The first indication that my world was about to be turned on its head came in the form of an urgent phone call from Mrs. Whitmore, my elderly neighbor. There was an unusual tremor in her voice, a sense of urgency that instantly put me on edge. "Logan," she began, her tone hushed, almost secretive. "You need to come here right now. Your wife, something's going on at your house. 2 men entered a little while ago. And this isn't the first time. You need to catch them in the act." Her words struck me like a sledgehammer, sending my pulse into overdrive. My wife, Lillian, had been distant for months, but I had attributed it to the usual stresses of life, long work hours, exhaustion, the natural ups and downs of marriage. But now a sharp seed of doubt lodged itself deep in my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I wasted no time. Jumping into my truck, I sped away, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The idea of someone violating my home, our home, made my blood boil. As I turned onto my street, an eerie stillness hung in the air. Mrs. Whitmore stood partially hidden behind her curtains, watching like a vigilant sentinel. The moment she spotted me, she hurried to her door and yanked me inside before I could even gather my thoughts. "Listen to me," she whispered, her eyes darting toward my house. "Lillian is home. I saw 2 men go inside. They parked a block away, but I've been keeping an eye on them." A hollow sensation settled in my gut. I felt like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. My mind struggled to make sense of her words. 2 men. I echoed, as if saying it aloud would somehow change the reality of the situation. She nodded gravely. "This isn't the first time, Logan. I've noticed cars like that before, always when you're not home. You need to do something about this." My jaw clenched so hard that a sharp pain shot through my teeth. The instinct to storm inside, demand answers, and confront whatever was happening surged through me. But deep down, I knew acting on impulse would get me nowhere. I needed a plan. "Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate you telling me," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "But if I go in there alone, I might not be able to stay in control. I need backup." Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and called my friend Nathan, a former cop. He answered immediately. "I need you at my house now," I said in a low voice. "Lillian's there and she's got company. Bring your sidearm. I'm serious." Nathan didn't press for details. "On my way," he responded before hanging up. As I waited for him to arrive, I repositioned my truck to block the driveway, ensuring no one could leave. The mere thought of those men walking out of my house, acting as if they owned the place, filled me with an anger I could barely contain. My fingers tightened around the handle of my glove compartment as I retrieved my firearm, checking that it was loaded before securing it at my waist. By the time Nathan pulled up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of adrenaline surging through me. We approached the house in silence, our footsteps muffled by the gravel. I gestured for Nathan to take the side entrance while I positioned myself at the front door. My fingers wrapped around the doorknob, pausing just long enough to hear the muffled voices inside. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and stepped inside, my weapon drawn. The air inside was thick, heavy with an unspoken tension. Moving carefully, I stepped forward, my shoes sinking into the plush carpet of the living room. Laughter floated from the dining area, Lillian's voice, light and carefree, followed by the deep chuckle of an unfamiliar man. The sound twisted something inside me, a sharp, gut-wrenching sensation that made my stomach churn. I shot a glance toward Nathan, who gave a single, firm nod. We moved deeper into the house, ready to face whatever awaited us. As I neared the dining room, the voices became clearer. Lillian's laughter rang out again, casual and untroubled, the kind I hadn't heard from her in months. It was a sound she hadn't shared with me in far too long. A bitter taste crept into my throat. Nathan positioned himself near the side door, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. We exchanged a brief look and unspoken agreement to proceed. My heart pounded like a drum against my ribcage as I took one last breath and stepped around the corner. And there she was. Lillian sat at the head of the dining table, a glass of red wine in her hand, slowly twirling the stem between her fingers as if she had nothing to conceal. Across from her, 2 men lounged in their chairs, exuding the kind of confidence that suggested they believed themselves untouchable. The table was littered with half-eaten plates of food, the rich aroma of roasted chicken and garlic filling the air. "Lillian," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The room fell into sudden stillness. Lillian's head snapped up, her eyes widening for just a brief moment before her expression shifted, first surprise, then something resembling mild irritation, as if I was the one disrupting something perfectly normal. Her gaze locked onto mine, her lips pressing together before she finally spoke. "What are you doing here, Logan?" Her words came out clipped and dismissive, as if she couldn't be bothered with the conversation. I repeated my question, my voice rising with frustration. "What am I doing here? My eyes flicked toward the two men lounging in my living room, their smug expressions stoking the fire already burning inside me. The audacity of it all. That's a pretty bold question, considering this is my house. Lillian let out an exaggerated sigh and set down her wine glass with deliberate nonchalance. Oh, don't start. They're just friends. Friends? I shot back, my anger flaring. You mean the kind of friends you sneak into the house when I'm not here? Her mask of composure faltered for just a second, her expression twisting into irritation. You're being paranoid. Let me guess, Mrs. Whitmore called you, didn't she? That old busybody needs to stay out of our business. Don't even try to shift the blame onto her, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension thick in the room. I know what's going on, Lillian. You've been lying to me for months. One of the men, the taller of the two with a thick beard and an air of arrogance, stood up, brushing crumbs off his shirt. He lifted his hands in what was probably meant to be a gesture of peace. Look, man, he said, his voice calm as if he were the reasonable one here. Nobody wants trouble. Maybe you should take it easy. His words only fueled the rage bubbling inside me. You don't get to tell me to calm down, I growled, jabbing a finger in his direction. You're in my house, eating my food, sitting with my wife, and you think you can tell me how to react? The second man, shorter and stockier, let out a quiet chuckle as if all of this was some kind of joke. That only made things worse. Sensing that I was close to losing control, Nathan stepped forward. His presence was steady, authoritative. I think it's time for you boys to leave, he said, his voice firm but calm. His hand rested lightly on the grip of his holstered gun, not a threat, but a clear warning. The bearded man hesitated, his eyes darting toward Lillian, searching for some kind of cue. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her expression a mix of boredom and irritation. Finally, she waved a hand dismissively. Fine. Go. I'll handle this mess myself. The two men exchanged a glance before moving toward the door, muttering under their breaths. I stepped aside, my jaw clenched so tight it felt like my teeth might crack. The moment the door shut behind them, silence swallowed the room. Lillian stood, wineglass in hand, and took a slow, deliberate sip before speaking. Her voice was filled with disdain. You just embarrassed me in front of my friends. Well done, Logan. Embarrassed you? I repeated, the disbelief thick in my voice. Do you even hear yourself? You've been sneaking around behind my back, and you think you're the one who's been wronged. She scoffed, setting the glass down with a loud clink. Oh, grow up. Not everything is about you. Maybe if you weren't so boring and predictable, I wouldn't have to find excitement elsewhere. The words hit like a slap, knocking the breath from my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. This wasn't the woman I had married. The Lillian I knew had been warm, kind, and loving. But the woman standing before me was something else entirely, cold, calculating, and cruel. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice raw. Do you even care? About me? About this marriage? She rolled her eyes, the dismissiveness in her expression only pushing me closer to the edge. Oh, spare me the pity party, Logan. Let's be real, this marriage has been over for years. Her words sliced through me deeper than any physical wound ever could. Everything we had built, every moment, every memory, every ounce of trust shattered like fragile glass. I had been blind, holding on to something that had long since died. I loved you, I said, barely above a whisper. I gave you everything. Maybe you shouldn't have, she shot back, a smirk curling her lips. That's on you. I turned away, my vision blurred by the weight of emotions pressing down on me. A steady hand landed on my shoulder, Nathan's. His presence was grounding, anchoring me just enough to keep me from doing something I might regret. Logan, he said softly, let's go. This isn't worth it. And he was right. It wasn't worth it. Not anymore. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms as I forced myself to breathe. Lillian still stood there, sipping her wine, acting as if none of this mattered, as if she had already won whatever twisted game she was playing. Not worth it, I murmured, my voice hollow. Then, turning to Nathan, I added, you're right. She's not worth it. Lillian's smirk deepened, as if she had broken me and was savoring the moment. My breath hitched, emotions warring inside me, anger, grief, betrayal. I could have screamed. I could have cried. But instead, an eerie calm washed over me. I turned to Nathan. Give me a minute, I said quietly. He hesitated, clearly uncertain if leaving me alone with her was a good idea. But I gave him a look, one that reassured him I was in control. At least for now. He gave a small nod and stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him. Lillian, now seated on the couch with her legs elegantly crossed, lazily swirled her wine in the glass. She looked like a player in a game she had already won, waiting for the next move. All right, Logan, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Let's hear it. What's the grand speech? That I'm a terrible wife? How I've ruined everything. Go ahead, let it all out. Her arrogance was maddening. Why? I asked, my voice unsteady. Just tell me why, Lillian. Was it about money? Attention? Were you just bored? She scoffed, taking another sip from her glass. Oh, don't act like some tragic hero. You think you're the perfect husband, but you're not. You're predictable, Logan. You wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, then go to bed every single day, year after year. It's like living with a machine. That's your excuse? I snapped. I worked hard to give us a good life. I thought that's what we both wanted, a stable, happy marriage. Well, you thought wrong, she said flatly. I need excitement, passion, things you clearly can't give me. Her words cut deep, each one like a fresh wound. My throat tightened, but I refused to let her see me crumble. So what now? I asked bitterly. Are you running off with one of them? Or both? Is that what excites you? Her smirk faded for the first time, her eyes narrowing. Don't you dare judge me, she hissed. You have no idea what it feels like to be trapped in a lifeless marriage. Trapped? I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You could have talked to me, Lillian. We could have worked through it together. But instead, you chose to sneak around like a coward. A coward, she shot back, rising to her feet. You're the coward, Logan. You hide behind your routines, your job, your ridiculous sense of morality. You're too afraid to admit that maybe we were never meant to be. The venom in her voice stunned me. I knew things between us had been bad, but I never realized just how much she resented me. If that's how you felt all this time, why stay? Why not just leave and chase after whatever it is you think you need? Because I didn't want to start over, she admitted bluntly. I like the security. The house. The perks of being married to you. But that doesn't mean I was happy. Her words poisoned the air between us. I felt like a complete fool, no, something worse. I had spent years believing we were building a life together, that we were a team. In reality, I had just been a convenience, a stepping stone in her selfish little game. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice low. You used me. You took everything I gave you and tossed it aside like it was nothing. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she said with an exasperated sigh. This happens all the time. People fall out of love. It's just life. It's not life, I said through clenched teeth. It's betrayal. She rolled her eyes and reached for her phone, scrolling through it like our conversation bored her. Are we done here? Because I have plans tonight. Plans? My voice cracked with disbelief. You're serious right now? What do you want me to say, Logan? That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Because I don't. Maybe if you'd been paying attention, we wouldn't be here. Her coldness was unbearable. Anger surged through me again, hotter this time, almost overwhelming. You're disgusting, I spat. I don't even recognize you anymore. Good, she said, that smirk returning. Maybe now you'll finally let go. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the woman I had once loved more than anything. I thought about everything we had shared, the laughter, the promises, the moments I had cherished. It all felt like a cruel joke now, a lie I had been too blind to see. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. Nathan was waiting outside, leaning against his car, his expression tense. Well, he asked. It's over, I said, my voice hollow. Are you sure? I swallowed hard and nodded. Yeah, I'm sure. As we drove away, I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me in that house. Nothing except broken trust and shattered dreams. The farther we got, the heavier the realization became. Every mile put distance between me and the life I thought I had, but it didn't lighten the weight pressing down on my chest. Nathan didn't say much, he didn't need to. He knew when silence spoke louder than words. But my thoughts weren't silent. They screamed. I could still hear Lillian's voice, cold and dismissive, echoing in my mind. Maybe now you'll finally let go. Let go of what? The belief that I mattered? The hope that the woman I had loved wasn't actually the monster she had shown herself to be? My grip on the wheel tightened as I pictured her smirk, the way she had looked at me as if none of it meant anything. As if I meant nothing. You okay, man? Nathan finally asked, his tone careful. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't okay. I didn't even know where to begin to feel okay. My chest ached like something inside me had been crushed beyond repair. I don't know, I admitted at last. What do you even do when your wife, I stopped, the word getting stuck in my throat. When the person you trusted most is the one who stabs you in the back? Nathan sighed, leaning his head back against the seat. First thing? You breathe. You're not gonna fix this tonight. Hell, you're not gonna fix it at all. Not if she's like that. I stared straight ahead, watching the road stretch endlessly before me. People like Lillian don't change, he continued. They don't even care that they're the problem. I nodded absently, but the words barely registered. My mind was already drowning in the wreckage. Deep down, I couldn't deny the truth in Nathan's words. Lillian had made her stance unmistakably clear, she had no interest in mending what was broken. Our marriage, my feelings, even the basic courtesy of an apology meant nothing to her. As we pulled up to Nathan's house, a simple ranch-style home on the outskirts of town, he handed me a beer the moment we stepped inside. We settled into the living room, and while the weight of everything still pressed down on me, the familiarity of his presence offered a small sense of relief. "So, what now?" Nathan asked, his gaze steady on me. I exhaled heavily. "I honestly don't know. I can't go back there, not tonight." "You can stay here as long as you need," he assured me. "But you have to start thinking long-term. Are you planning to fight for this marriage, or is this where it ends?" His words lingered in the air, forcing me to confront the reality I had been avoiding. Fight for the marriage? Was there anything left to fight for? Lillian had made a spectacle out of my pain, ridiculing me without a shred of remorse. The thought of trying to rebuild after that twisted my stomach. "She doesn't want to fix this," I said at last. "I don't think she ever did." Nathan nodded, his expression calm but firm. "Then don't waste your time chasing after someone who's already gone." The next morning, I woke up on Nathan's couch with a dull ache in my head and a heavier weight in my chest. It wasn't just the beer, it was everything Lillian had left in ruins. I picked up my phone, scrolling mindlessly, not looking for anything in particular until a message from an unknown number caught my eye. I opened it. A photo. Lillian, laughing with one of the guys from last night, drinks in hand, seated at what looked like a bar. The timestamp? Just an hour after I had left the house. A cold dread settled over me. I had no idea who had sent it, maybe someone trying to stir the pot, but it didn't matter. The image burned itself into my mind, making the betrayal feel fresh all over again. Only this time it was sharper. Undeniable. She wasn't even pretending to hide it. She had moved on without hesitation, without guilt, while I was still drowning in the wreckage she had left behind. "You good?" Nathan's voice pulled me from my thoughts as he stepped into the room. Wordlessly, I handed him my phone. He took one look at the screen and let out a low whistle. "Wow," he muttered. "She's not even trying to be discreet, huh?" "No," I said, my voice tight. "She doesn't care. She never did." Nathan's expression hardened. "So, what are you gonna do?" I got up, pacing. My mind raced with emotions I didn't know how to process. Anger. Hurt. Betrayal. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make her feel the way I felt. But what would that accomplish? Lillian wouldn't feel regret, not now, not ever. She was already gone. "I'm done," I said at last. "I'm filing for divorce." Nathan gave a small nod, his face serious but approving. "That's the right move, man. You deserve better than this." As the day went on, I began making the necessary calls, one to a lawyer, another to the bank, setting the process in motion to separate my life from Lillian's. Just as I started to feel a small sense of control over the situation, my phone rang. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Logan," she said, her voice trembling. "You need to come home." I froze. "What's wrong?" "I've been watching the house," she said urgently. "Lillian's there. And there's someone else with her. Not the men from before, someone new. They're fighting. Loudly." I grabbed my keys, my heart pounding. "Fighting," I repeated, already moving toward the door. "Yes, Logan," she said, her voice shaking. "It doesn't sound good. You need to hurry." I didn't waste another second. I ended the call and bolted outside. Nathan was right behind me, his instincts sharp, his hand drifting toward the holster on his belt as we jumped into his truck. As we sped toward the house, my mind raced. Who was this new guy? Why were they fighting? And what was I about to walk into? The moment we pulled up, I spotted Mrs. Whitmore standing in her driveway, her face pale with worry. She lifted a trembling hand, pointing toward my house. "They're inside," she whispered. I didn't hesitate. There was no time to think, no time for caution. I stormed up to the front door and shoved it open, bracing myself for whatever I might find. The door slammed against the wall as I entered, my pulse pounding in my ears. The first thing that hit me was the shouting Lillian's voice, high-pitched and frantic, followed by a man's deeper, angrier tone. The living room looked untouched, but the noise was coming from upstairs. Nathan was right behind me, his posture tense, hand hovering near his weapon. "Careful, Logan," he murmured. "We don't know what we're walking into." But I didn't care. I took the stairs 2 at a time, the sound of my footfalls loud, each one an unspoken warning. As I reached the top landing, the voices became clearer. "You're out of your mind," Lillian screamed. "Get out before I call the cops." "Go ahead and call them," the man roared back. "Let's see what they think about all the lies you've been telling." The door to our bedroom was slightly open. From where I stood, I could see Lillian near the window, her arms crossed tightly, her stance defensive. The man paced back and forth, his face contorted with rage. He was tall and wiry, his sharp eyes darting toward the door the moment I stepped inside. His stance was tense, almost confrontational, as if he were ready for a fight. "And just who do you think you are?" he snapped, jabbing a finger in my direction like I was the one trespassing. I didn't respond immediately. My focus was locked onto Lillian, who, instead of fear, wore an expression of pure annoyance. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice low but edged with anger. Lillian rolled her eyes, her hands finding her hips in an all-too-familiar display of irritation. "Oh, don't start with me, Logan. This has nothing to do with you." My patience snapped. "Nothing to do with me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've turned our home into some kind of spectacle. And now there's a stranger shouting in our bedroom. How exactly does this not involve me?" The man stepped forward, his jaw tight, his expression one of pure disdain. "So, you're the husband," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "The clueless fool she's been stringing along." Before I could react, Nathan's voice cut through the room. "Watch it." He stood in the doorway, a silent yet undeniable presence. His hand hovered dangerously close to his holster, his sharp gaze locked onto the man like a predator assessing a threat. Lillian threw her hands in the air. "For heaven's sake, can everyone just calm down? This is Derek. And he's nothing, okay? He's just being dramatic." Derek let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Tell your husband the truth, Lillian. Tell him how you've been playing both of us." Or should I? A sinking feeling twisted in my gut. Whatever he was about to say, I already knew it wasn't going to be good. I turned to Lillian, my stomach in knots. "What is he talking about?" Lillian shot Derek a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Shut up, Derek. You don't know what you're saying." Derek sneered, unfazed. "Oh, I don't? She's been lying to both of us, man. Using you for the house, the money, the stability, while she comes to me for everything else." Lillian's composure cracked. "Shut up!" she shrieked, lunging toward him. Nathan immediately stepped between them, extending an arm to block her path. "Stay back," he warned, his voice firm. "I'm not playing games." My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. I turned back to Lillian, my hands shaking. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Have you been with him too?" For a fraction of a second, Lillian hesitated. It was just long enough to confirm my worst fear. Then, as if flipping a switch, she straightened her posture, lifted her chin, and let her defiance harden like armor. "And what if I have?" she shot back, her voice sharp. "You're not exactly Prince Charming, Logan. You're pathetic. Always whining about your feelings, like that makes you some kind of hero." Her words hit me like a blow to the chest, knocking the breath from my lungs. My vision tunneled, narrowing to just her, this woman who looked like my wife but spoke like a stranger, venom lacing every word. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice unsteady. "I gave you everything, Lillian. Everything. And this is how you repay me." She scoffed, throwing her hands in the air. "Oh, please. Don't act like you're some kind of saint. You're boring, Logan. Predictable. I needed more." Derek snorted. "And I bet you didn't tell him about the money, did you?" Lillian froze. A flicker of panic flashed in her eyes before she masked it with fury. "Shut up, Derek," she hissed. My pulse quickened. "What money?" I demanded, my voice rising. "What the hell is he talking about?" Derek took a deliberate step forward, his lips curling in disgust. "She's been siphoning money from your joint account, thousands. Telling you it's for bills, but really she's been stashing it away for her little getaway fund." "Shut up," Lillian screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of her own unraveling lies. But it was too late. The damage had been done. My mind raced, piecing together every red flag I had ignored, the sudden interest in managing our finances, the unexplained withdrawals, the erratic behavior. It all clicked into place, and the realization hit like a punch to the gut. I turned to Lillian, my voice barely holding together. "How could you do this to me?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, her face blank, indifferent. And in that moment I saw the truth as clear as day. She didn't care. Not about me, not about our marriage, not about anything we had built together. Derek gave me one last glance before turning on his heel and walking out, his footsteps echoing down the stairs. Lillian remained still, her silence a challenge, daring me to make the next move. Nathan stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. "Logan, let it go." I gave a small nod, barely aware of my own actions. My body moved on its own, as if running on autopilot. Without another word, I turned and followed Nathan out of the house, never once looking back. The drive to Nathan's place was steeped in silence, an unbearable weight pressing down on my chest. I felt hollow, like my entire existence had been scooped out and discarded. Lillian's words, her betrayal, the sheer lack of remorse played over and over in my head like a broken record. And Derek, arrogant, smug Derek, had exposed everything. Every lie, every manipulation. Lillian had been using me all along. Nathan finally broke the silence. "Logan, I don't want to push you, but you need to act. She's not just destroying your marriage. She's robbing you blind." I exhaled slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know. Tomorrow, I would call my lawyer." "You need to freeze your accounts tonight," Nathan urged, his tone firm. "Every moment you hesitate gives her another chance to drain more. Do it now." Without wasting another second, I pulled out my phone and logged into the banking app. My chest tightened as I scanned the recent transactions. Derek hadn't exaggerated, thousands of dollars had vanished over the past several months. Some withdrawals were small, barely noticeable at first, but others were significant. The most recent one had been just a few hours ago. "She's already taken nearly 10 grand, I muttered, my throat constricting. That money was meant for the mortgage. Nathan's jaw clenched. "This isn't just betrayal, Logan. This is theft. You need to shut her down completely." Standing right there in Nathan's driveway, I made the necessary calls. I canceled our shared credit cards, froze our joint accounts, and moved what little was left into an account solely under my name. Each call felt like another step toward closing the door on my marriage. By the time we stepped inside, the night had deepened. Nathan handed me another beer and sat across from me at the kitchen table, his expression somber. "You're doing the right thing," he reassured me. "It's going to hurt, but you have to rip the bandage off." I exhaled, staring down at the table. "I know," I admitted. "I just don't understand how I missed the signs. How did I not see who she really was?" Nathan sighed. "Because you're a good guy, Logan. You trusted her and she took advantage of that." The first rays of morning light were creeping through the window when my phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. My stomach churned as I opened it. "You think you're smart, cutting off my access to the money? You're pathetic. One way or another, I'll get what I'm owed." I stared at the message, my hands shaking. The sheer audacity of her words was staggering. After everything she had done, she still saw herself as the victim. "Lillian?" Nathan asked, glancing over my shoulder. "Yeah," I confirmed, handing him the phone. His face darkened as he read the message. "She's bluffing," he said, shaking his head. "You've already locked her out of the accounts. There's nothing she can do, unless she decides to come after something else." I muttered under my breath, my mind racing. The house, the car, my reputation. Lillian had already shown she was willing to burn everything down to get her way. "Then you need to protect yourself," Nathan said firmly. "Call your lawyer, get everything in writing, and document every single thing she says or does from now on." The rest of the day was spent putting out fires. Meeting with my lawyer, filing paperwork, and preparing for whatever storm was coming. By the time evening rolled around, exhaustion weighed on me, but a gnawing sense of unease wouldn't let me rest. Something still felt off. Then my phone rang again. But this time it wasn't Lillian. "Logan," Mrs. Whitmore's voice trembled on the other end. "You need to come over. There's something you should see." Cold knot formed in my stomach. "What is it?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "It's Lillian," she said. "She's been at the house all afternoon, having some kind of meeting. Men coming and going. I think she's trying to sell things." "Sell things?" I echoed, dread pooling in my gut. "Furniture, electronics, anything she can get her hands on," Mrs. Whitmore continued. "She's got a truck in the driveway right now." "Thanks for letting me know," I said tightly. "I'll take care of it." Nathan insisted on coming with me again. As we drove toward the house, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "If she's trying to sell my stuff, I swear." "Stay calm," Nathan warned. "We'll stop her. Just don't do anything you'll regret." As we pulled into the driveway, my worst fears were confirmed. A moving truck was parked in front of the house. Lillian stood outside, barking orders at two men as they loaded boxes onto the truck. I immediately recognized some of the items, our TV, the coffee table, even the wedding china we had barely used. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted as I stepped out of the car. Lillian spun around, annoyance flashing across her face. "Oh, wonderful, you're here." "Yeah, I'm here," I snapped. "And you're not taking a single thing out of this house." "Actually, I am," she retorted, folding her arms. "Half of this is mine, Logan. You don't get to dictate what I take." I let out a bitter laugh. "After what you've done, you don't get to claim anything. You've already stolen enough." She rolled her eyes. "Spare me the dramatics. You're just mad that I finally stopped playing the role of your obedient little housewife." Anger surged through me, and I stepped closer. "You don't get to act like you're entitled to anything after betraying me." One of the movers, a broad-shouldered man with tattoos, stepped forward, raising his hands defensively. "Hey man, we're just doing our job. If you've got a problem, take it up with her." "Oh, I will," I said, glaring at Lillian. "But nobody is taking anything until we sort this out." Lillian smirked and pulled out her phone. "Fine. Let's call the cops and see what they have to say about my right to take what's mine." Her threat threw me off for a moment, but before I could respond, Nathan stepped in. His voice was steady and firm. "Call them," he said. "We'd love to expose how you've been siphoning money from the accounts and selling off assets that were never yours to begin with." Lillian's confident exterior wavered for just a fraction of a second. She mumbled something under her breath before giving a dismissive wave to the movers. "Fine. Whatever. But this isn't over." As the moving truck pulled away, a blend of exhaustion and relief washed over me. Yet, one thing was certain, Lillian wasn't going to back down, and neither was I. The vehicle disappeared down the street, leaving behind a silence that wasn't peaceful, but rather the unsettling calm before another storm. Standing in the driveway, I stared at the empty space where the truck had been, my fists unconsciously clenching. Nathan remained close, a steady presence beside me. After a few moments, he finally spoke, breaking the silence. "She's not going to stop, Logan," he said, his tone firm. "You need to push back harder. She's testing how far she can go." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know," I muttered. Nathan's expression was serious. "She's already taken too much. But if she thinks she can strip you of everything and walk away unchallenged, then she's seriously underestimating you. Just don't lower yourself to her level. We can outthink her." This was no longer just about money or material possessions. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my pride, and the life she had tried to rob from me. For the first time since this ordeal began, a renewed sense of determination sparked inside me. That night, I stayed up late, poring over financial records, emails, and any documentation that could provide leverage. With my lawyer's guidance, I began constructing a solid case against Lillian. Every unauthorized withdrawal, every questionable transaction, every misplaced cent, I was uncovering the full extent of her deceit. The deeper I dug, the more damning the evidence became. Payments made to unfamiliar names, vague transaction descriptions, extravagant purchases I had never laid eyes on, it all pointed to someone who had been meticulously planning her escape long before our marriage even started crumbling. Lillian hadn't just been unfaithful, she had orchestrated an exit strategy, ensuring every detail was in place before pulling the rug out from under me. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A new message from Lillian. "You think you're smart? Cutting me off from the money won't stop me. Watch your back." A chill crept down my spine as I read the words on the screen. Across the table, Nathan glanced up from his coffee. "Another threat?" he asked, his voice calm but alert. I nodded, holding up the phone for him to see. "Yeah. She's getting desperate." "Good," Nathan said, leaning back in his chair. "Desperate people make mistakes. Let her bury herself." The following day, an unexpected knock came at Nathan's door. When I opened it, I was startled to see Derek, the same man who had exposed Lillian's betrayal, standing there. He looked haggard, as if sleep had been a luxury he couldn't afford. "What do you want?" I asked, my tone sharp and guarded. His voice was tense. "I need to talk to you." "It's about Lillian." I hesitated. A part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but curiosity got the better of me. Reluctantly, I stepped aside, allowing him in. Nathan remained nearby, arms crossed, watching with a wary gaze. Derek sat down, rubbing his hands together anxiously. "Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, and I don't blame you," he started. "But you need to hear this. Lillian is dangerous." I narrowed my eyes. "Dangerous how?" Derek exhaled, his shoulders slumping. "She played me too. I thought I was the only one, but when I found out about the others, I confronted her. She lost it, told me I meant nothing, that I was just another pawn in her game. Then she started threatening me, saying she'd ruin my life if I ever got in her way." His words hung in the air like an unpleasant stench. A part of me still resented him, but there was something in his expression, fear, regret, that made me listen. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked cautiously. "Because she's lost control," Derek admitted. "And she's coming after you harder than you think. She doesn't just want to leave, she wants to destroy you." A heavy weight settled in my chest. Lillian had already taken so much from me, but if Derek was telling the truth, she wasn't finished, not by a long shot. "What do you suggest?" Nathan asked, his voice cool and calculating. Derek hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. He placed it on the table and slid it toward me. "This," he said simply. "It's everything I have on her. Messages, emails, even recordings. She's been lying to everyone, not just you. She's been conning people, pitting men against each other, hiding money in offshore accounts. If you use this, you can stop her." I stared at the flash drive, emotions churning: anger, gratitude, disbelief. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. "What's in it for you?" Derek looked away, his jaw tightening. "Because I actually loved her. I thought she was different, but she used me just like she used you. I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can help you stop her before she does any more damage." With the flash drive in hand, for the first time, I felt like I had a weapon of my own. That night, I met with my lawyer again, determined to put an end to Lillian's schemes once and for all. His eyes widened as he swiftly scanned through the documents, his expression growing serious. "This is huge," he stated firmly. "If even half of this is true, she's deeply involved: fraud, theft, even conspiracy. It's all right here. Can we use it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Without a doubt," he replied, his tone measured. "But we need to be careful. If she catches on that we have this, she'll go into full damage control." I nodded, my thoughts racing. This was my moment to turn the tide, to reclaim the control she had stolen from me. But this wasn't just about getting even, it was about setting things right. Lillian had caused harm to too many people, and it was time she faced the consequences. That evening, I sat in Nathan's living room, gazing out at the dimly lit street beyond the window. In my pocket, the flash drive felt almost unbearably heavy, as though it carried not just data but the weight of every deception, every betrayal, every moment of pain. Yet for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope stirred within me. Nathan settled beside me, handing over a glass of whiskey. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, studying me closely. I exhaled slowly, my voice steady. "Yeah. It's time she learns that you can't destroy people's lives and expect to walk away untouched." He lifted his glass in silent acknowledgement, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I smiled. The battle wasn't over, but I was ready to face whatever came next. The plan was in motion. My lawyer took immediate action, filing the necessary legal paperwork to safeguard my assets, while the evidence stored on the flash drive laid the foundation for a case that could do more than just end my marriage. It could finally hold Lillian accountable. This was no longer just about divorce. This was about justice. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a courtroom colder than any place I had ever been. Lillian was there, of course, dressed impeccably, radiating an air of practiced indifference. But her carefully constructed facade began to crumble as the contents of Derek's flash drive were revealed. There were emails exposing her schemes, text messages revealing how she strung along multiple men while mocking them behind their backs, financial statements uncovering an offshore account she had secretly funneled money into. And then, the most damning piece of evidence, a recording of her own voice, dripping with contempt. "Logan doesn't have a backbone," she had sneered. "He'll cave in like he always does." The courtroom murmured in shock. Lillian's smirk faltered as the judge's expression hardened. Her attorney scrambled to mount a defense, but it was obvious they were fighting a losing battle. By the end of the day, the ruling was in my favor. Lillian was ordered to return the money she had stolen, and any claim she had on the house or other assets was nullified due to her fraudulent actions. But the real victory wasn't just financial. It was the sheer panic in her eyes as she finally grasped the reality of her situation. She attempted to save face, of course, storming out of the courthouse in dramatic fashion, throwing out accusations that I had set her up. But it was meaningless. No one believed her anymore. Her lies had unraveled and the support system she had meticulously built around herself was beginning to collapse. A week later, Derek reached out. "I heard what happened," he said over the phone. "I'm glad she didn't get away with it." "Me too," I admitted. "And thanks for stepping up. I know that couldn't have been easy." Derek exhaled heavily. "Yeah, well," he said, his voice laced with resignation. "I guess we both had to learn the hard way who she really was." In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding. The house, once a painful reminder of failure, became a fresh start. I got rid of anything tied to Lillian, her clothes, her photos, even the furniture she had chosen. Every empty space was a step closer to reclaiming my life. Nathan remained by my side as he always had. One evening, as we grilled steaks in the backyard, he glanced over at me. "You know," he mused, "this could have broken you." "But it didn't." I nodded. "It almost did," I admitted. "But I think I needed to hit rock bottom to finally see what really matters." He flipped a steak. "And what's that?" "Respect," I said without hesitation. "For myself and for the people I allow into my life. I spent so much time trying to fix something that wasn't worth saving. I won't make that mistake again." Months later, I found myself sitting in a quiet coffee shop, reflecting on how much had changed. The scars Lillian left behind were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had started therapy, reconnected with old friends, and even explored new hobbies. Life wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long while, it was truly mine. Then a woman approached my table, her smile warm and sincere. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, motioning to the empty chair across from me. "Not at all," I replied, returning her smile. As we talked, I felt something stir inside me, something I thought I had lost. Hope. Not the naive hope that had once kept me tethered to Lillian, but a quiet, steady belief that the future held something better. Looking back, I realized that despite everything, Lillian had taught me something important, though not in the way she had intended. Betrayal is painful, but it also brings clarity. It peels away any illusions, compelling you to face the harsh realities, not just about those around you, but about yourself as well. If I were to offer advice to anyone experiencing something similar, it would be this: never allow another person's darkness to overshadow your own light. Defend yourself, hold on to your dignity, and when everything finally settles, learn to release it, not for their sake, but for your own. Because ultimately, the most powerful form of revenge isn't fueled by resentment or rage, it's creating a life so fulfilling and successful that those who once sought to break you fade into nothing more than a distant, irrelevant memory.